An external investigation is out tonight over allegations the girlfriend of Duluth Mayor interfered in city business. Now, the findings indicate those accusations against Amber Gursky were not substantiated. Northern News Now's Ryan Hayes is following that story for us tonight. Ryan, there were actually 2 reviews performed here.
That's right, Dan. Attorney Michelle Soldo looked into the matter after the independent review was called by Mayor Roger Reinert. Soldo not only said the allegations were not substantiated, but that they were, quote, based on incomplete information and inaccurate speculation and conjecture refuted by the facts. The report says media reports incorrectly suggested that Gursky interfered with city business. It says Gursky was merely a volunteer who serves as the mayor's personal social media and manages his personal calendar, neither of which are improper or illegal according to the report. The report also states it's not unusual, or improper for elected officials to confer with significant others, including spouses and partners, about their work, as long as information not meant for the public is not shared. They say the Mayor Reinert did not share such information and that staff primarily engaged with Gursky about the mayor's calendar and his social media. Mayor Reinert said back in October that he would never intentionally or ask anyone else to do anything that negatively impacts the city, and that he welcomed the review as a form of transparency. Soldo investigated media reports on the matter, texts, calls, and emails between city staff and Amber Gursky from December of 2023 and September of 2024, as well as information provided by city staff regarding the frequency of their interactions with Gursky. Amber Gursky released a statement saying in part, quote, volunteers helping during an administrative transition is commonplace. The record shows I asked for nothing and received nothing. But as a result of the story last fall, I have been the target for months and near daily online harassment and bullying. City Council President Roz Randorf also released a statement saying in part that the council is pleased with the transparency over the matter and that they look forward to focusing on the city's priorities.